there really is no evidence of, any existence outside of this one.
Well, I personally don't believe that there's anything after death either, so I have a significant motivation to make life extension a reality. I have a lot of motivation to keep myself very healthy. I personally take over 100 different supplements a day of drugs, vitamins, hormones, whatever I am able to uncover in the scientific literature that looks like it will extend my lifespan. I personally take it, and I write about it and publish it in our magazine, and many of our members want to follow the same direction that I and our scientific advisory board is doing.
Because most of us have been brought up under fairly religious backgrounds, fairly religious teachings, and we tend to conform. We're wired to conform. And this is a really great instance where you're much better off thinking for yourself if you can, and trying to ignore what you've been taught.
I don't know about other people, but I think if I die, that's it for me. Nothing happens.
I'd answer it by saying I just don't know, and nobody knows. Nobody knows there's an afterlife, and nobody knows there's not an afterlife. If I had to bet on it, I'd say there's no afterlife, and I am betting on it. I'm putting my heart and soul into aging research because I want to hang around. I don't want to take a chance. I'd be happily surprised if there was one if I died, but nobody really knows that. I think that's
obviously if I think actually I would say that I'd take that back a little bit. I'd say there is an entity that's going to take care of us after death. That entity is us. That's the collective activities of all of us people, which is our collective consciousness and our will to build an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent entity, which is our collective technology and our collective consciousness. And that entity is, by definition, God. So I'd say that God will be there when we become God.
I personally think that once you're dead, it's over. I do not subscribe to any of the stories about the afterlife. I think it's not impossible, but there's no evidence that would convince me that this indeed occurs. I do not believe in the existence of a soul. I don't think that after destruction of the brain there's anything left of my memories or myself. And of course I wouldn't want to find out, although perhaps this is not the right way of saying that. The only way you can find out what happens is if you die, and if it turns out that there's nothing going on, then you don't really find out, right? So this is something that I would like to avoid. I would prefer not to even know. Stay alive and avoid the risk of there being nothing left.
There's an interesting dichotomy in almost everybody in this country and in this world. Either they believe that when they die, they're definitely going somewhere, and almost certainly it's a pretty good place to go to. Not many people are convinced they're going to the bad places. So that's okay, they're comfortable with that idea, so they can deal with death. Or they want to be absolutely sure they'll live forever on Earth. It's actually quite difficult to be a rational transhumanist and say, well, I'm going to have a really good shot at living indefinitely, but I may not make it. I may get squashed tomorrow in a car accident, I may just not make it. That's a pretty uncomfortable position. And I think people like Herbert and Cass, they built the whole worldview on this idea of death being inevitable and necessary, and my goodness, if it's not, what a disaster that means for all of history before now. It's just really a terrible thing. And what if I don't make it? What a terrible thing. And if that limit is taken away, we're not mortal anymore, what am I going to do with my life? What does that all mean? And they don't want to deal with those issues, and so they'd rather just say it can't happen, and it'd be bad if it did.
When people are asked how long they want to live, the usual response is 80 or 90 years. Most people equate increased chronology with increased physical disability and eventual death. But when people come to understand that the effects of aging can be reversed, objections emerge. It seems that many people think that greater extension of lifespan will disrupt the so-called natural order.
And that's a misconception. What we considered natural in the 1200s is not natural today. And what we consider natural today will not be natural tomorrow.
I hear that type of thing all the time. And my standard answer is human beings have gone against the natural order of things ever since time began. Just a half a millennia ago, the average lifespan for a human being was roughly 25 years old. If you live to be 30 or 35, you are considered an extremely old individual. Now we routinely live into our 80s and 90s. I guess you can make the argument that that's going against the natural order of things as well, but what it is an example of science and the technological progress that we've made in not only extending our lives, but enabling us to live healthier and more active lives well into our 70s and 80s.
1,000 years ago, people lived on average 35 to 40 years. I mean adults. I'm not even including the children who were dying in droves at age 5 or 2 or 1. So what we're doing right now is unnatural for the vast majority of citizens to reach the age of 70 or 80. And I think it's good to be unnatural in this way.
I think that there are lots of things that are natural that I don't like, and dying is one of them. Maybe I would be dead of a number of natural diseases if there weren't unnatural antibiotics and treatments for them. So natural by itself is not necessarily a good thing.
Proven that natural resources in this world, the existing resources, are enough to feed about and house about 6 billion more people. So you can basically double the population without stretching, and that's not including any future technologies, that's not including seabed mining, that's not including new food technologies, it's not considering nanotechnology, not considering any of that. Also, the population in the industrialized worlds is actually on a decline except for immigration. Japan's an example where their population is on a decline because there's not much immigration there. In this country, if it weren't for immigration, we'd have a population decline. So I think the more educated people get, the less children, obviously, and we all know that, the more educated people get, the less children they have.
The idea of life extension for almost a quarter of a century now. One thing that is hilarious that still comes up really is the idea of overpopulation. If you live a lot longer, won't the Earth become overpopulated? Well, back in the early days of discussing these ideas, that was something people pressed pretty strongly because population was still expanding quite rapidly. But there's been a large demographic transition since then. Many countries have reached zero population growth or even beginning to decline. The USA has a larger population growth than most of Europe simply because of more immigration as well as certain groups having more births. But overall, we're headed towards really the end of population growth in the world in a few decades. So the objections no longer has the same driving force, though it never really did have very much force in the first place. Because if you look at the mathematics of it, really what matters is how many children each couple has, not how long each person lives. That makes a relatively small difference. So even if that was a problem, it'd be more reasonable to ask people to limit the number of children they have rather than to die.
History has shown that, as population increases, productivity also increases. So, as we have an increased workforce to work at these problems, we're going to see an increase in solutions to these problems. We're going to see more ideas and a greater workforce to actually apply these ideas.
Overpopulation is a common one. So I can address that mathematically in that if people live longer, they tend to reproduce a little more slowly. I mean, in poor countries, people have 5, 6, 10 kids because a lot of them are going to die. And that's where the population is growing the fastest. So overpopulation is a problem, but you slow the problem down by having people live longer and be healthier.
So yeah, all the concerns people voice about these things are the concerns of habit. They're the concerns that come out of the human condition as it's currently understood. Because the human condition, our whole culture, our assumptions, everything, what we consider to be poignant and important and interesting, stems from dying and aging. It's everything is influenced by that.